Good afternoon. My name is Chris Gabrielli, and my job is A, to follow that act, and B, to cut 7 to 10 minutes off of my presentation to get back on time. Okay, I may not test well. So this is a slide that Lawrence uses routinely, and as you can see, I put it up to highlight that in their own strategy construct, things other than rigorous standards also count. That was certainly high quality enrichment. It might or might not have been critical thinking or fluid reasoning. I think there was a lot of effort. Congratulations to those terrific performers. So my job, briefly, is to find the thing I just dropped. Maybe. Okay, I guess I'll have to use the other thing. Thank you. Oh, there it is. Thank you very much, Josh. My job is to briefly tell you why Lawrence matters and tell you a little bit about Lawrence. The first point I want to make is I want to introduce myself. Whoops, it's all going the other way. All right. Okay. So my name, as I said, is Chris Gabrielli. I'm CEO of Empower Schools, which has been fortunate to be kind of a partner with Lawrence and inspired by Lawrence to move and work with other communities beyond that. I'm also a lecturer at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. I want to thank TFA for this opportunity. TFA is, to my mind, kind of the sui generis player in American education reform. And after years of being an enthusiast of the entity, I can't say that I'm prouder than to say that my oldest child, my son, John, will be a member of the Corps next year in Connecticut. So that's... I also want to thank Josh Bieber, who's been just a great ally from the day he arrived on so many of these things. Later on, you're going to hear from the commissioner. You're going to obviously hear from Jeff Riley. They've been great colleagues. They invited us to throw in on this at the beginning, and I'm really grateful to them. Seth and Julie, who have been colleagues from the beginning, part of the team here. Don't blame them for anything wrong in my presentation, but they were very helpful. I have a bunch of TFA colleagues at Empower Schools. One of them, Chelsea Banks, who's now at business school, was central to the development of this presentation, so I thank her as well as all of the rest of them, if any of them are here. In brief, what happened in Lawrence, I'm obviously doing really poorly on this, speaking of test nerves, is that the state, under a law I'll talk about in a moment, had the opportunity and really the necessity to take over the district, and through that process to see if they could make things better. And the happy story I'm about to tell you is things got better, and not only they got better, but they got them better. The process was as important in my mind as the outcomes. So right after me, and I'm going to lecture at you briefly here, you'll get a panel of people who have been directly participating in it, including the commissioner, and then the session will close with an interview with Jeff and Dale Rusikoff, who is the author of a book, The Prize, that I think takes a look at a different takeover that maybe has a more mixed or perhaps alarming set of conclusions to draw. It's a really good book to read. So why should we care? Because these two things, I hope you will leave today believing each of these two things. Results at scale matter, not just at individual schools, and because how you get there matters, not just getting there. So I'm going to start by hammering a couple points on results, because I think there are lots and lots of things in American education where people say there are results, and then you look a little closer and you look a little closer and they aren't really there. Now I'm going to talk about test scores despite the previous presentation, because I know Lawrence values achievement in every dimension for students. Level 1 is a level in Massachusetts education that is the highest level the state can give a school for its absolute performance and its growth. The number of schools has more than tripled. The number of students going to schools that benefit that way is quadrupled. That's important. The proficiency rates of students have improved. And as you can see on the left, in math in particular, going from 28% in the year before the change to 44%, a more than 50% increase in that proficiency rate. That's incredible. That's across all 14,000 students of Lawrence. So it's, this is scale. ELA is also gained, more moderately. Graduation rates are up. Dropout rates are down. Again, very important outcomes for the individuals involved. It's not just data that I'm showing you or data that the district would show you. Lawrence is, for example, the subject of a study that's now on the National Bureau of Economic Research's website, independent Harvard econometric analysis. What I want to highlight is their conclusion. By the way, for an academic paper on the National Bureau of Economic Research website, a sentence that says, our study undoubtedly proves an encouraging proof point that the improvement of chronically underperforming districts serving primarily low-income and ESL students is indeed possible is about as promotional as you get on the NBER website. So really exciting conclusion. And let me just show you one slide from this Harvard econometric study. The line at the top is the control group, very carefully organized data from all of the districts in Massachusetts where the majority of students are low income. The line below, but catching up, is Lawrence. It's only got the first 2 years of data. If you look on the left, that is the English as a second language students. I mean, that is remarkable, entirely narrowing the gap that was alarmingly large with other similar districts. Long way to go to reach the aspirations, right? And I know Lawrence would be the first to be clear, progress is important. Ultimately, you got to get to the right place. Nonetheless, impressive. For non-English as a second language students, the gap eliminated and now actually a gap in favor of Lawrence. So I hope you believe me when you see that data, and there's lots more you can read, that what has happened in Lawrence is actually the very rare confluence of factors to lead to large-scale success. But the process matters too. Here you see Secretary Arne Duncan, then Secretary, and on the right, AFT President Randy Weingarten, visiting and sharing in the excitement and credit and joy of the situation within a couple of weeks of each other a year ago. Down below, you see the union presidents, the now mayor, and Superintendent Riley. Unfortunately, Mayor Rivera can't be here because of the snowstorm that made me late too, but it's exciting to see them smiling in the photo and smiling because they're working together. So I want to tell you a tiny bit about Lawrence. I want to be really careful. You never can accurately characterize a single place, but I want to give you a tough first slide that I don't think is fair to Lawrence, but I want to give you a sense of what people in Massachusetts knew about Lawrence. This was a cover article of the Boston Magazine that called it City of the Damned. It said crime is soaring, schools are failing, government has lost control, and Lawrence, the most godforsaken place in Massachusetts, has never been in worse shape. This article came out about the month, or 2 months, I believe, after the receivership took place. The mayor, who's sort of questioned in that headline, is not the current mayor. And I want to get into Lawrence politics, but I just want to be clear, no one thinks it's about him. Objectively, Lawrence is a city 30 minutes north of Boston. It is a classic product of the industrial era. Continues to have immigrant populations, now chiefly Dominican and Puerto Rican. It has the lowest income of any city in Massachusetts and one of the lowest in the country. It has the kind of demographics you might expect, and sadly, it had the kind of performance you might expect. Lawrence has been the focus of discussion about change for 25 years now, and 20-something years before anything was really done that made this kind of difference. Let me make 3 points about the context. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we got there and what the implications are nationally and get off the stage. So context, a couple of things are important to say. Massachusetts has had what is seen as the strongest policy framework in the country since 1993 for education reform. And there was a discussion at the time, what happens when we give a lot more money, which is part of what happened, to districts and ask them to reach high standards if they don't get there. But until 2010, it wasn't very well defined what happens if they don't get there, despite the fact that we had plenty of districts, not just Lawrence, that weren't getting there. In 2010, an important law spurred on by the Obama-Duncan administration was passed, the 2010 Achievement Gap, and one of the things it provided was the power of the commissioner and the state to step in and do things differently, and that they did, and Lawrence was the first place. I want to highlight the importance of consistent and outstanding leadership. These two gentlemen have been involved from day one. These things take time. This is the beginning of the 5th year of this receivership. The results are impressive. The goals are a lot more aspirational than the results to date. Leadership and continuity matter. I also want to highlight that a core tenet of this receivership and this approach is not that what has to happen is everything old in Lawrence has to go away and everything new from outside has to come in. That is not the tenet of this change. So the slogan, and it is kind of a slogan that we use there and that our organization uses other places, that it's about combining the best of Lawrence and the best of the Commonwealth. For example, on the support side, there are some terrific community organizations and educational organizations, and most importantly, a bunch of terrific principals and a bunch of terrific teachers, giving them the opportunity through Autonomy to do the kinds of things that in other places only charters have had the chance to do is a core approach here. On the other hand, there are great organizations from outside that are interested and available to come help when the circumstances make sense. That's true in supporting schools, and that's true also in operating schools. As an example, one of the schools now operated by a different partner is operated by the Lawrence Teachers Union. That's kind of rare. Others are operated by charters that historically were outside the system, now being willing to contract and operate a district school on the same rules as all district schools. So I want to talk about three aspects of the Lawrence approach, and then I'll talk about what it looks like on the ground. I hope if you take one thing away from it, this is, I think, the core of the model that led to the results. A belief that individual schools are the unit of success, that it is not about district strategies that these things happen. It's not necessarily only about a teacher in a classroom, and I know who I'm speaking to here when I say that. It's about a school that makes the choice wisely and well and continuously to step up to the challenge and the opportunity and to continue to improve. If you believe that, then you should have a system of schools, not a school system as the saying goes, and those schools all should have a level playing field, whether they're operated by the Lawrence Teachers Union, by someone who operates charters elsewhere, or by the existing or a new principal. Everybody should have the same money, everybody should have the same student assignment, everybody should have the same freedoms, and let's get going about the business of helping students succeed. That means you need school-based freedoms, way above and beyond what normally happens in districts. You have to pair that, of course, with accountability. The results have to follow. That changes dramatically the role of the central office. The central office has to go from command and control to support and empower. Similarly, it changes the role of the collective bargaining agreement. I'm proud of the fact that there's a collective bargaining agreement voted by a majority of the teachers in Lawrence, one that has been voted for on a very similar agreement in Springfield, where some of our work is as well, that teachers see as actually changing the game for them. Second point I want to make is, what does the leadership do in a situation like this? More than anything else, if you believe in this model, it's all about the transition. This beautiful vision of a system of high-performing schools, each with the autonomy and accountability to drive things, is great. But how the heck do you get there from the starting point of a set of schools in trouble? So it's all about that set of transitions. And along the way, the key thing is remaining a catalyst, not becoming a new form of the traditional system. Hard to always be sure whether you're getting that right. This leadership team has done a great job of it. The political strategy, and I got to say, I don't know where Dale Rusikoff is here. There you are. Reading your book was pretty meaningful to me along the way here, because the politics of collaboration look very different than the politics of confrontation. The politics of saying the past was the problem, everybody involved in it is the problem, the place is the problem, the students are the problem, the families are the problem, so we're here from outside to fix it, is just not a good strategy. I think that's the way I parodied it makes it obvious, but I think at times this reform movement has been guilty of signaling exactly that it believes that and behaves that way, even maybe takes pride in asserting that. This is built on a very different premise. So what does this look like in action? Number one, teachers are at the focus. This system works because it works to make teachers able to do their work, and I think the panel will talk a lot about that. I won't belabor it, but when you put a TFA person in charge, even if he likes to be a would-be rogue TFA person, the reality is that, of course, is a focus. I also want to emphasize this concept about a balance here, a balance between the academic goals and what it takes to have also the arts, music, drama, sports, advisory, other things. What it means to balance between the enduring fundamentals and people and what the energy you can get from the new. And frankly, a really rarely discussed thing in education reform, something that honors and values our commitment to the students first, but recognizes an education system as a bunch of adults, and if it keeps failing for those adults, it's really not going to be sustainable. How do you make it work for everybody involved? The result of a thing like this is diverse paths to success. Now, I'm certainly not going to take you to the slide, but this is a Lawrence slide that we stole, but the key piece of this is these 4 schools, all of them are among the strong schools in Lawrence, and there are others as well. I'm not trying to pick out these 4 to make, throw elbows, represent 4 totally different scenarios. The one on the left was a high-performance school before they got there, and the good news is they haven't messed it up. The one on the right is an outside operator partner who's done a superb job, has some of the most impressive gains for students in the state, and is kind of a fresh start player, and did that at one of the lowest performing schools. The 2 in the middle have predominantly got the same teachers, in one case a new principal, in one case not, who've taken advantage of these flexibilities with supports to get the kind of results I showed you earlier. Lots of different ways to get there, pretty exciting to see it in action. I want to talk about what we call smart change, which is really just the point. I mean, who's for dumb change, right? But smart change to say, how do you sequence and phase this, and where do your priorities have to lie? A couple of points. One is, as much as this is about changing schools, right from day one, Lawrence is focused on also directly supporting students. For example, on vacation academies where 25, 30% of the students in Lawrence come in and get in-depth support where they need it academically most from existing and other teachers, it has made a big difference in helping kids succeed even as their schools evolve. Focusing on early wins, these things build on a sense of pride. There's a lot of pride and excitement in Lawrence, Massachusetts. I called Jeff one day on a drive back from Springfield. We're working with the state and others to turn things around, and I said to him, I was just at a meeting in which people wanted to be like Lawrence. I showed you the Boston Magazine title, right? It was amazing to be in a meeting where people said, if you guys could help us do what got done in Lawrence, we want to do this. That has happened very fast. It makes a lot of pride for everyone involved. Phasing the toughest challenges. There are a lot of different things to do in evolving a district. I think they've been very smart, and Jeff may talk more about this with Dale or otherwise. Pick the right battles up front, evolve your approach over time. Last thing I want to do is talk about what I would call Lawrence in context. This is kind of the Empower Schools part of the storyline in my mind. Lawrence lies at the crossroads of some important things that are going on in America. One is a set of takeovers. I don't think of Lawrence chiefly that way. Randy Weingarten sort of doesn't think about it that way. I don't think it has to be thought about that way, but the reality is there are places in America where the state has had to intervene. And some of them have gone really well and some of them have gone really poorly, and it's important to learn the difference. Lawrence is also at the crossroads of what nationally is often called the portfolio approach. As I told you, we call it open architecture or open systems. Some nuance in that difference, but broadly, theoretically very similar. How do you create a set of schools where different types of schools can all prosper on a level playing field? I think it also speaks to governance innovation, and that's really the closing point I want to make. Governance matters, not just leadership, governance. So in most of America, we have local districts with elected school boards running those districts. And if you go to suburbs, people say, I moved there for the schools, presumably they're satisfied. But if you go to a lot of places, it's hard to defend that historical patterns of governance are working that well for us. A small number of places, including Lawrence, the state, clearly financially and otherwise, more than an equal partner in the educational responsibilities. It's only the state that has a constitutional responsibility for students to succeed, has been active, and at times, it's been very productive. Then you got charters. Now, lots of people have lots of things to say about charters, but one obvious thing is charters are an innovation in governance. They're independently authorized and run by an independent board whose job is to make the right decisions. That's very interesting. So I think as we go forward in thinking about reforms, we have to ask not only educationally what does it take to succeed, which of course is the star part of the Lawrence story, but also how do we have both high quality and representative governance? In Springfield, and I certainly won't talk about this more than a second, the approach we've taken working with the state and the local folks is to have a new board over a set of middle schools that serve 80% of the students, 4 people appointed by the commissioner, 3 people serving because they're local leaders, the mayor, the superintendent, and the vice chair of the school board. That balanced 7 people meeting in public, having discussions, and voting together, I think represents kind of a hybrid form of governance I think has a lot of potential for the future. Together, I think these things are the third way. We have an endless World War I style trench warfare thing going on in America between traditional districts and charter schools. And I think we can debate what all the merits of each are, but there are merits on both sides. Similarly, we have some tensions between state and local. The third way says you can get not just a compromise, but a real synergy. So schools in Lawrence are hard to say, are they, depending on the school, is it a district school or a charter school? They have the autonomies of charters. Sometimes they're run by people in other places have run charters. Most of the time they're run by people who are district employees. Which one are they? Hard to say. Is it the state? Is it the locals? Who's really organizing the place? It's both. Last thing I want to highlight is looking forward, kind of where this goes. I mean, I think the most important reason I'm excited to be part of this session is Lawrence's success creates, I think, an incredibly important opening for a discussion about how we could do these far more widely and in scale. And that success is really important. There is increasing state enabling legislation. Many of you may live in states. Texas is a good example of one that's recently passed a law that creates a lot of interesting opportunity. We're working in Denver, Colorado on a publicly announced zone. Colorado has an interesting law. There's a lot of places where there's more opportunity. And what I find exciting is the level of hunger for a better way forward that works for students. It's got to be effective, but that's also large scale and universal in who's served and harmonious. That doesn't mean you can have everything perfectly. There are tensions anywhere, but just pure battle is kind of getting fatiguing. On the downside, it's still early at every level. Anything new takes different types of people sometimes to lead and to do things. You'll get a flavor for that shortly on some of those folks. And of course, anything worth doing, I've stole this line from Commissioner Chester years ago, anything worth doing can be done poorly. So, just because you have autonomy doesn't mean you have a good school. Just because you have a zone that looks like this or a district looks like this doesn't mean it's going to be done well. So the role of the state, for example, in being a good authorizer of efforts like this is crucial. I hope you got a flavor of why Lawrence matters from the students themselves as well as from this presentation. I hope you got a flavor of how deeply rooted this is in the community, both in the partners and the people doing the work, but also in great organizations and partners from outside. And I hope you're excited about this third way. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Come on up, panel. So as the panel's coming up, let me thank Chris Gabrielli. He has long been a mentor and a leader that I aspire to. He has so many strengths. The only one I have long thought he does not have is being concise with his words, and that was actually right on time. So thank you, Chris. Can everyone hear me okay? So my name is Josh Bieber. I am Justin's handsome older brother. I am not. I'm not at all. I now actually have the worst last name that one can have in education. I cannot walk into a classroom of middle school students without kids freaking out, asking me if I'm his brother, and 4 times I have now been asked, "Are you his father?" Which is an insult on so many different dimensions. But I am the executive director at Teach for America, and I am humbled to be up here and moderate this panel. And so I hope you got a sense of what's happening on the ground, the flyby 101 from Chris, and we're going to use the next 20 or 30 minutes here just with people at multiple different altitudes of the work to kind of dig in a little bit deeper in terms of, so what does this look like? How does this feel? What are the synergies and what are the tensions on the ground? And I am just going to rapid fire a bunch of questions, and I hope people will interrupt each other and jump in and make this lots of fun. And so, Shalimar, we are going to start with you, and maybe you can introduce yourself for 30 seconds by way of starting with the why of this. I want to start with the why and then get into some of the bigger political questions. And so I'd just love to know, like, your quick background, why you took the job that you took, particularly when you had another offer on the table that you might want to mention, and what your vision for this was when you took it on.
Well, Josh is hinting at the fact that I'm actually a TFA dropout.
A TFA never was, is actually a better, to be clear.
I almost made it into the Corps, but I was sidetracked by the work happening in Lawrence. I am currently the Chief of Staff of the Lawrence Public Schools, and I've held this position for the last 3.5 years. And I do this work because it's personal to me. I was born and raised in Lawrence Public Schools. I am a product of the school system. And I have a niece and 9 cousins who are currently enrolled in our schools, and 2 more that are coming into kindergarten next year. And I want to thank those teachers in advance, because those 2 are a handful. I'm the first in 3 generations to graduate from college. And I am the 2nd oldest grandchild of 17. And I am currently the only one that holds a degree. I'm in graduate school now, and again, the only one of the 17. That doesn't include my aunts, who holds a degree. It is by far, or arguably, the most difficult position that I hold. Jeff Riley is very difficult, but it's not as difficult as holding that position in my family. And there were many times where I questioned why. Why it was me and not everybody else. And it pushed me to really think deeply about what I got that my family didn't get. And I can point to 2 big factors, and it was the relationships that I built with my teachers. They loved and believed in me enough to challenge me, to push me, to scold me. And I think that's a big part of what our students don't get. And a second part, which I tout all the time, I had the opportunity to ice skate, to own a pair of ice skates. I had the opportunity to go boating and canoeing, and play basketball, and I was a peer leader, and I did rock climbing on the weekends. I had an opportunity to participate in real high quality enrichment experiences, much like you saw in the intro of this presentation, and we'll see again at the end. Those experiences really taught me how to be a leader. They taught me how to take initiative, how to take risks, how to push the limits, to believe that I could be anybody and do anything. And I think that's what our vision in Lawrence is all about. It's making sure that, as Chris mentioned, staying true to our 4 pillars. Our kids need those high quality enrichment experiences. They need rigorous academics, without a doubt. But they need to know that hard work matters. They need to know that they can be anything that they want to be. They need to have a positive mindset. And they also need to think critically. They need to push themselves and push others around them.
So, Loris, I know when we were preparing, I was like, Loris, here are the questions I'm going to ask you. And she's like, here's the question I prefer for you to ask me. And it was a version of this same question, which is about your background and your why, and connected to, like, as a second-year teacher now in Lawrence, like, what are your early takeaways and thoughts on what's happening in your hometown?
So Shalimar and I actually grew up together. We were next-door neighbors, and we have known each other since first grade. We had a lot of the same teachers, so we have a very, very similar story. And every time we see each other, we're like, which teacher was it that inspired us to, like, be where we are right now? Because I think that when people think of low-income communities, they often think about the kids who achieve and leave others behind, and that's not the case for our cohort of peers. We were high-achieving, and we always think about, like, there has to be that one teacher or a few teachers that put us on this trajectory to, like, success, especially compared to some of the kids that didn't necessarily have the same opportunities. I had a lot of the same enrichment experiences that Shalimar did. We did a lot of those clubs together. And when I was talking to Josh preparing for this, in thinking about myself as a teacher, I cannot fully tell my story if I don't tell my background. I was born in the Dominican Republic. I come from a huge, huge family, and I moved here when I was around 5 years old. I started off in an ESL class and then transferred to a regular class where I met Shalimar in first grade. And I am also a product of Lawrence Public Schools, and I can name every single teacher that I've had in Lawrence because they meant that much to me when I was there. And in thinking about that, I also think about the fact that I was very privileged and lucky in a way because I was a high-achieving student. And I often think about the kids that weren't necessarily high-achieving, who didn't go to school every day, who may not have had the level of attention that I got when I teach my own students. And I pay extra attention to those kids who don't come to school, and I ask why. What are the things in their lives that are causing them to miss class? In that informs my own practice when I'm teaching. I was lucky enough to do the Upward Bound program. It was a program that is one of the few that exists that brings kids from Lawrence, outside of Lawrence, and to go to an independent school in Dedham. So it's a private school, and I went to that private school. So our paths diverged a little bit. I didn't actually go to high school in Lawrence. I didn't live in Lawrence for a really long time, and coming back after the receivership was kind of like a shock for me. I was away from Lawrence, and I felt this pull to come back because I needed to be a part of all of these positive changes that were happening there. It was something that was very salient in my identity, the fact that I was from Lawrence. I carried a lot of shame being from Lawrence, and I've gotten over that because there's so many positive things that have happened there, and I'm so, so proud of Shalimar and all of the work that everyone's doing there. And that's something that I think a lot of people carried, and to hear people say that they want to be like Lawrence was probably one of the greatest things that's happened to me in a really long time.
So there are a bunch of big, meaty policy edu questions that are particularly unique, and I think Chris touched on it. I'd love to jump into some of those. And Commissioner Chester, I thought I'd start with you because the move for state intervention in and of itself was arguably, at least in Massachusetts, the first of its kind in terms of state receivership. And I guess I'd be curious to know, 4 years in, how is that shaping your view on the role of state departments of education on the concept of receivership in general, knowing, like, if people haven't guessed yet, it was not a not controversial thing to think about doing. And so I'm curious, 4 years in, what your reflections are.
No, thanks, Josh, and good afternoon. Chris did a great job of framing sort of the context. Massachusetts has long been partnering with our districts that we're most concerned about. Lawrence is one of a class of districts. Two others were Holyoke and Southbridge, which not coincidentally we've since exercised receivership in. But that class of districts were identified back more than a dozen years ago as underperforming districts under what was then the state's regulatory scheme. And basically the state spent almost a decade in those districts partnering, trying to bring resources to the table, trying to support improvement efforts. And unfortunately in Lawrence, as well as in Holyoke and Southbridge, fast forward 12 years, or in the case of Lawrence, fast forward 6 or 7 years, and we're not seeing any movement. So Chris mentioned the 2010 Achievement Gap Act. That act brought a new set of regulatory tools. It allowed for the state receivership, the state takeover, which is a very sweeping authority. It gives the receiver the full responsibility, the full authority of the school committee, the elected school committee, and of the superintendent, control over budget, over staffing, and so forth. And so when that authority came to be, it just seemed to me that there was no justification for sitting back and not exercising that authority. We'd already spent a fair amount of time, substantial amount of resources, trying to support improvement in this class of districts. Lawrence was the one that we took on first. I can go through the various rationale for that. The most recent superintendent of the district at the time of the receivership was under indictment, was subsequently convicted. School committee was dysfunctional. School committee did a search trying to find a superintendent, came up short. And so we exercised the receivership. And we've done that twice since. Back in April of 15, we exercised receivership of the Holyoke School District, very high poverty school district. And just 2 weeks ago or so, we exercised receivership of a third district, the Southbridge School District. It's very clear to me that to be successful in these endeavors, we need great partners, and Chris is one of those with Empower Schools. Teach for America has been very instrumental, and Josh, in your role in Massachusetts, is gearing up a pipeline recruitment campaign for Western Massachusetts. How many of you are Massachusetts educators? Excellent. So the rest of you, we're waiting for you. We've got jobs for you. We want you to come to Massachusetts. We need you. But it's bringing in partner organizations, including charter schools. I'm a big fan of bringing some of our successful charter schools, and we have some outstanding charter schools, largely in the Boston area, and I can talk about the challenge of Western Massachusetts compared to the greater Boston area. But I'm anxious to improve on our regulatory schema where charter schools can step into existing schools, not create new schools, but to take over existing failing schools. And Jeff's done that very smartly in Lawrence with several schools, several of the...
Commissioner, can I actually jump in on that? Can I jump in on that point?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'd love to, and we're going to be like jumping in a lot, or I'm going to try to model, because nobody else has jumped in yet. I'd love to turn it actually to the principals, because like it strikes me one of the governance takeaways here is the autonomy and cover that state intervention enabled at a district level, but then the core open architecture question here is around autonomy at the school level, like that catchphrase around running a oh, now I'm going to get it wrong, a system of great schools rather than a great school system, which sounds like wordplay, but does invert very seriously how we think about the unit of change. And so we've got two principles in Lawrence, and I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that in very different kinds of schools. You can give the 20-second background, but like what is like autonomy meant in terms of how that is played out? How do you think about what it takes to run a great school in that context?
Well, you want to go first? After you, Sarah.
I'll go. So just as a bit of background, I'm the newest to Lawrence up here on the panel. I've been at my school for a year and a half now, and previously worked at a turnaround school in a larger district in Boston. And I think for me, the most striking difference, as Mitchell's talking about kind of the state intervention at the district level, is the idea that the entire district is unified around this idea of whatever it takes in absolute achievement by all students in the enrichments, but that each school is doing it their own way. In Boston, what sometimes was faced was that, yes, there was a turnaround school, but there was other 120 schools that needed the attention of the district. There's many district people represented here today, and I credit them in my time so far as things are open to discussion, things are open to possibility. It's not a we don't do that here or we can't do that, it's how can we get that done. And I think that's, for me, the experience between being in a turnaround school effort versus a total turnaround district effort.
So Josh, you asked about autonomy specifically, and just as context, I was principal for 5 years of a high-performing charter school in the Boston area. And as soon as I heard about receivership, sort of threw my dignity at Jeff's feet and was begging Superintendent Riley to hire me up here in Lawrence, because I wanted to work in a neighborhood district public school. And that's what I do now. I'm lucky to work in a school that serves every single student who is zoned to it. And there's no variance out, there's no process by which you unenroll, there's no application. You come into my school and it's our responsibility to find a way to help you achieve the goals you have set for yourself, and that your parents have set for you, your family has set for you. And I think autonomy absolutely matters at a school level. It was one of my biggest questions in terms of thinking about leaving the charter network. As a charter principal, I could do whatever I wanted, and really just had to produce results at the end of the day. Had a school credit card. You know, if the lunches didn't show up one day, I'd go to CVS, which was next door to my school, and buy a bunch of bread and peanut butter, and then the kids would have lunch, and that would be great. And so coming up to Lawrence, sort of there's a big question for me of how do I work in a school district as a principal and still be able to get things done? Because as a leader, I mean, I'm telling you right now, if you know me, like there's nothing that infuriates me more than someone who's not in my building, doesn't know my kids, like telling me what to do. That makes me furious. And the kind of people I hire as teachers don't want me as a leader, someone who doesn't sit in their classroom and teach their students, telling them what to do. When someone who has power over you and is making you do something that you don't think is right, like that is the most infuriating thing in the entire world. And as a new parent, I am learning about that as well when, oh my goodness. And I have found myself saying things to teachers that my son, my goodness. Anyway, he's very creative with his use of hands and mouth, so we're working on learning about disciplinary systems from the opposite perspective. So I think autonomy is crucial as a principal, and I've been really lucky and excited to see how that plays out in Lawrence. You know, Superintendent Riley has said, you know, these are our 4 pillars. These are really important things for kids. But you as a principal have the opportunity to think about what that means at your building level with your teachers and with the families that work in your school. So, you know, we need to ensure that every student is in class, engaged in high-quality learning experiences all the time. But what does that look like? At my school, in particular, we have a large percentage of newcomer students who are new to this country. We have a large percentage of students with disabilities, particularly emotional disabilities, that lead them to have really, really intense responses when frustrated. And because I have autonomy as a principal, I'm able to staff up in those areas. We're able to have mental health services for our school. We have a full-time social worker and a full-time psychologist who's able to provide support to teachers in creating effective behavior plans to engage those scholars. Allison Balter is here. She was pivotal in forming a newcomer program at our school, so shining on you. And she's now running that at the high school level. But thinking about what that looks like at our school, that would not have been possible, I think, in another district, because as a principal, I would have been given sort of this budgetary, okay, you can make decisions about $100 worth of paper here, or maybe get $100 worth of blue paper, whereas, Superintendent Riley gives you your budget and says, what trade-offs will you make in order to have the staffing model that you want? And as a principal, that both empowers me, but excites me. And then that level of respect that's afforded to me as a principal, I am expected to afford to my teachers. And that's been a really big learning experience. I think in my first year, to be quite honest, I think a lot of my teachers were like, who is that dictator standing up there? But I've really learned over the last 3 years, how do I engage my teachers? How do I give them a real voice? And similarly, how do we engage with parents? As a charter school principal, I often informed parents of what was happening. And now the question is, how do we engage parents? Can they help make decisions at the school level? And that has come because of the way our principals are led. We are now learning to lead our teachers and families in that same way, with that same respect.
Can we double click on this idea? Because I kind of want to segue, because you said something to the effect of, nothing drives me crazy like somebody who doesn't really get me, know me, telling me what to do.
That drives me crazy.
That makes lots of sense, like wherever you work from. But it strikes me like a corollary of that concept, and one that I think we often hear about not going well in versions of things like the one we're talking about, is with students and families, right? Like the idea that any kind of outside whatever is gonna come in and tell you what to do. And I know a very important and deliberate part of this effort has been oriented around how do we engage families and students and community in meaningful ways. And I'd like anyone, would love to hear people jump in on that. Both like, how have you done that? Is it working? Where is it working? Where is it not working well? What are the tensions? Like, what are the tensions in this kind of context?
I can answer that question. I work at Up Academy Oliver, which is a part of the same network as Como School, and I was one of the founding science teachers. So the students, my first group of kids that I taught in my first year of TFA, just transitioned out of the failing school and were taken over by Up Academy. And there was a lot of pushback. They had no idea what was happening. They didn't know why they had to wear uniforms. They were responding poorly to the merit-demerit system, and we had to really take a lot of time to invest them into the system and get buy-in from them. Additionally, a lot of the parents really didn't want us there. And they had no choice because it was a district school. It was a neighborhood school, and that's where they were zoned to. So we got a lot of phone calls from parents, like not understanding why. By the end of the year, I can say that a lot of my students have come back this year after they've been in high school to thank us for what we have done to help them out. And part of that has to do with the fact that we put in so many efforts to reach out to families. We've had family days. We organized a parent-teacher association for parents, and my school especially, and I'm sure Como's as well, is very careful about hiring people who speak Spanish and who can communicate with the parents, and really focus on hiring people who are part of the community. In my school, I have 2 cousins that work there, and I had no idea that they were working there until I first went there. So there are a lot of people who grew up in Lawrence who work at these schools and are invested, and know part of the people in the community, who go to church with people in the community. They're teachers who are part of the same church, part of the same outside organizations. So by going into a close-knit community and hiring people from that close-knit community, you already have a little bit of that buy-in to begin with.
And Josh, I would just add, I don't know if on Chris's slide of partners, 1647 was mentioned. We were given the opportunity to partner with them, again, up to the school to make this decision. They are an organization that focuses on building parent engagement through home visits. Our goal is half of our students will receive a home visit this year, and I have to say, in terms of my teacher climate, it has been one of the strongest things we're doing. It is not something that teachers had experienced before, but after being trained, they are finding very deep connections with parents, improved attendance, improved homework rates, and the parent surveys we're getting back are incredibly promising around parents feeling much more engaged as they have a deeper relationship with the staff.
So I'm going to throw out some rapid-fire questions here. And if people aren't inferring yet, one of the headline takeaways that I'll unapologetically hope people are at least chewing on in all of this is some version of the yin and yang slide and the third way concept, right? Like the idea that progress can be made in ways that at least attempt to bridge rather than exacerbate lots of historical edu debates, right? Like that the idea that there can be a district operated by lots of different kinds of schools with some operators and traditional district schools all working in a similar construct, that it can be done in a way that includes like unquestionably some outside intervention with lots of deep community integration. One of the ones we didn't quite touch on, but I know Jeff would yell if we didn't, is this idea of high academic rigor and a focus on student achievement and high quality enrichment, sports, arts. Like, does anyone want to touch on how they see that playing out? Is that actually happening? Are there tensions in that?
Yeah, so I would like to highlight one particular dimension, and I'd love the educators and staff who are on the ground in Lawrence to tell me if this is right or wrong. But one of the real neat stories in Lawrence, and I didn't fully anticipate this, is in fact the notion of teacher empowerment, right? So, I mean, that's kind of an oxymoron for a district that's been taken over to be talking about teacher empowerment. But in fact, there's a whole new approach to compensation. You get paid for what you do and what you produce, not for how long you sit in the seat and how long you and how many credits you earn. The work rules are not standardized at the district level. The work rules are determined at the building level, teachers working with administrators. And there's additional opportunities for teacher leadership that are recognized both through compensation and through position without leaving the teacher ranks. Some of those opportunities are at the district level, leadership cabinets. Some of those opportunities are determined at the school level, where schools make the decision about teacher leader kinds of roles and what those would be and who's going to fill those roles for extra responsibility, leadership opportunities, and so forth. And it's just remarkable to me when I visit schools in Lawrence and talk to the teachers, how empowering it seems to me that has become. Now, I drop in and drop out, so I'd love to hear others comment on that.
I think that in terms of the teacher roles, since we do have a receivership, we have a lot of young teachers. I think we need to also consider the fact that we need to make sure that teachers actually stay in Lawrence. I think a lot of people will come into the community and work for a couple of years and leave, and I think that's a really great first step in terms of empowering teachers and making sure that they stay within the community and really focus on those skills. And I haven't really, in my school, really heard too much about the teacher empowerment, so I think that needs to be brought, yeah, we need to push it forward a little bit more, because I did hear about it at first at the beginning, but it's not something that it's actually talked about with a lot of people. And I think because of the receivership and all of the attention that we get in Lawrence right now, we need to start thinking about how do we sustain this once the receivership ends.
What would that look like for you?
What would that look like for me? I think, honestly, my vision for Lawrence is investing in all the people who already have roots in Lawrence, all of the people who work in the system who are already there and have family there or have moved to Lawrence. We have some teachers that have moved to Lawrence who came from other places, and invest in those particular individuals because they're already tied to the community. And my long-term vision is to invest in the students so that they can, at one point when they're done, join Teach for America, maybe, and then become the teachers and the school leaders in Lawrence. Because I think, and I tell my students this every single day, the way that I address it with them is I don't say, if you become a teacher, if you go on to college or whatever, it's like when you go to college and when you become the leaders of this community, these are the problems that we need to solve. So I think just getting into that mindset, and that starts with the classroom and everything that we're doing, just getting into the mindset, that should be our long-term goal, to make sure that our kids are the ones that inherit this and are the legacy of this receivership.
Yeah, I was waiting for a snap. Two rapid-fire questions before we bring on Superintendent Riley and Dale. In the spirit of constant learning, obviously, the headline for being a case study is we think there's some real progress here, but I think we always want to improve. And now that at least parts of this model are either being replicated in our own state or people from other places are looking inward to say, what lessons should we take? I'd be curious, maybe Shalimar or Commissioner or whoever, if you had to rewind 4 years, are there something different you wish you had done? Or are there just particular cautions you'd have as people think about this complex stuff moving forward?
When I think about when we started, I think about the first day when I was being interviewed by Jeff Riley. He didn't know this, but I was actually interviewing him. I'm like, this is my community. And one of the big pieces of our conversation was about, how he was actually going to do this work. What does the turnaround look like? How are we being sensitive to our students and our families and our teachers who've been there forever, who are invested in our community? And I think the most important thing for me, or what sold me on coming back home, was the fact that we were including everyone in the conversation, and that there was real opportunities for people to come to the table to help us plan, to help us implement, to help us execute on the work. And when you think about, we had community partners who were like, I've never been inside central office before. Those are our enrichment partners who are in our schools every day now. Those are the folks who do whatever they can when the school wasn't doing what they were supposed to do to compensate for what their students should have received during the day. And so I guess I'm not sure I regret anything, or as a team we might regret anything. I think it's really helped build us and push. We've transitioned some of the phrases that we use about the actual model or the work that we do. But I appreciate that. It's been part of our evolution as a school district to say, these are the steps that we took. Every step, whether right or wrong at the time, helped us get deeper into the work and helped more better work come to the surface. And I appreciate that was happening with everybody at the table, again, including families, principals, teachers, and community members.
A couple things that we've learned from the Lawrence experience, and each community is different, very different context. One of the things that we're looking at in Holyoke is looking at in the turnaround plan, the restructuring of the high school earlier in the turnaround. And it was a very deliberate decision in Lawrence. Jeff may talk about this, in sort of waiting on the high school and tackling K-8 initially. In Holyoke, we will probably tackle the high school right out of the blocks. The second thing that we do, I think, better, and much of this is about the state, what the state does better at this point than we did in Lawrence, and we were inventing a state receivership as we went along. Chris Gabrielli was a tremendous partner to me in that regard. So in Holyoke and now in Southbridge, we're much more deliberate about communication with the community, about being on the ground in the community, about both face-to-face, video and written communication with parents on a weekly basis, and not just holding a meeting at the high school. Because what happens when you do that is you get some parents, but disproportionately you don't see the parents whose kids are getting the short end of the stick. And so what we've done in the last two receiverships is we've been very deliberate about going out to where families live, to the communities where they live, and holding meetings in those locations, again, face-to-face, to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, what families can expect, and so forth.
I would underscore that point. I think if I could, I wasn't involved sort of in the system level with the receivership, but I can think back to 3 years ago when we were thinking about what it would take to turn around our school. And I think the way that we have done family engagement this year has changed the way I lead in terms of, we did a ton of home visits in our first year, but it was very focused on explaining to parents the change that would be happening in our schools. And the way that we do family engagement this year is focused on, you are our partners. What is the change you want to see in our school? What is it going to take? You know more than we do. What is it going to take to serve your kids? And that has been transformative. We've had some disagreements. We've had to really confront policies that we've used, and some of which have changed, some of which have not. But I wish that we had done that from the beginning, because it has been probably the most valuable professional development that I've had as an educator.
Can I just add too? I think that when we are thinking about, as a community member, seeing all of these entities coming to our community, and like Shalimar said, when she was talking to Jeff Riley, she was interviewing them. That's how I felt when I was applying to UP. I was like, okay, so you're in my community. What's happening here? What are you doing with my kids? And it's really important that you also get that perspective from people who went through through the system. They actually experienced what it was like before you're implementing all these changes. And two, try to work in partnership with the families. And I think one of the, I don't know, it's like one of the really positive consequences of all of this work has been that people who have gone through the system are seeing this work, what's happening in Lawrence, and are deciding to come back and work in Lawrence. A lot of people are finding jobs in Lawrence, which was like something that was kind of a rarity. You had to go outside of Lawrence to get work. Economically, it wasn't really there wasn't much going on there before the receivership. And I think that through that and hearing that through word of mouth, I think that's going to be a huge boon to what's happening in the city, because before the work that we're doing in education, the idea for people who grew up in Lawrence was to leave and not come back, and that was the definition of success. And I think that we're changing that definition of success, and we're bringing it back to Lawrence in terms of, and framing it around what does it mean to be a leader in this community.
So yes. And let me segue. So we're about to transition, and I hope one of the other messages that people are inferring in all of this is that for system change to work, there needs to be empowered leadership at every altitude. Teachers, principals, district leadership, community partners, families, student leadership. And that this is actually not just a story of singular leadership, but actually collective. Period, point. And leadership at every altitude, including at the district level, does matter too. And one of the, sometimes people ask me, once you get to know them in a minute, they're like, why this guy? And so I thought we'd give Superintendent Riley an opportunity to actually demonstrate some answer to that core question. So let's bring him up to close out our session for some one-on-one reflections. And thank you to this panel for being here. They braved all sorts of snow to be here. Superintendent Riley and Dale. Let's create an intimate setting here. A little armchair discussion. Be here all week. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Dale.
We're just going to have a really casual conversation here.
No snapping or shining.
Right. Okay, let's start with this. You've spent your entire career in the Boston School District.
Pretty much.
Or most of it. And, you've been working to try to improve education from inside the system instead of outside through a charter network or a school reform organization. So what makes you a district guy?
So to be clear, I started my teaching career in Baltimore City. We're former Corps members, yep. The old people don't snap, so we appreciate that. I appreciate that. But I did really kind of grow up professionally in the Boston Public Schools. My children attend the Boston Public Schools. So, obviously it's an important part of my life. And it was hard to leave. As when I was a principal in Boston, I always felt like the kids that I was serving, many ELL students, many special education students, weren't going to find their way to a charter lottery. And I was told that charter schools were set up as laboratories of innovation that were then going to come back into the district and help us. And instead, I think what we had was this civil war developed, where we kind of have two competing systems, which may or may not be on a level playing field. And I felt like I was waiting for the charter schools to come back. And it didn't really happen until I got to Lawrence. But I believe that in a school district, all your schools should be good. Wendy Kopp, I think, said one day all students. She didn't say one day some students. And so perhaps I've been tilting at windmills, but I just believe that you've got to work in the system to really solve the problem. And when I had the chance to come to Lawrence, we brought some of my friends who ran charter schools into the district in a small number of cases. We said, we need you to give up your charter, your lottery, we need your teachers to be unionized, but come back into the system. And we were able to do that, and I think that's, we're trying to do something at scale and in a different way than kind of a separate situation.
Thanks. At the time that you became the superintendent, there were two really prominent recent examples of reform school district leaders. One was Michelle Rhee in Washington, D.C., one was Joel Klein in New York City. And I'm just curious, did you have a model for the kind of leader you wanted to be, and if so, what was it, or who was it?
So I think my view was more parochial. I'm not sure I really had a national perspective on what was happening. I certainly knew Michelle from Baltimore, and I saw the movie and the Time magazine. But I guess for me, my philosophy was always that you try to do things with people and not to people, and that you actually get better results when you work together. And I'm not going to say that I always had that. I think when I was early on in my educational career as an assistant principal, and I had a very charismatic principal as a leader, we did a lot of the discipline in the building. We made the teachers' lives easier. And then when we subsequently left that building, the building fell apart. And so what that taught me is you really need to distribute leadership. You need to invest in your people. You need to believe in your teachers. And everybody needs to take ownership of it if it's really going to work and be sustained.
The receivership model in Massachusetts gives you an awful lot of latitude. You can remove teachers. You can suspend aspects of the teacher's contract. You can bring in outside operators to run district schools. What are the most important points of latitude from your point of view that you have to make the district better?
So I think the receivership statute was very broad and gave me pretty serious authorities. Almost immediately, there was one gentleman who said, this is our Katrina moment, and that we should fire all the teachers and turn it into charter schools. And I didn't think that was the case at the course that we were going to chart. But those authorities did allow me to kind of reset the canvas and create the district that we wanted to create. And so, although we had this kind of ability to bludgeon people to death, we in fact tried to use a scalpel and be really thoughtful about what authorities we would use and what authorities we wouldn't use. But having the authority itself allowed me to kind of reimagine what the district would look like.
What were the most important kinds of authority that you had that you wouldn't have had in the previous, before the receivership?
Sure. I mean, I think I had the authority of the school board and the superintendency. I had the ability to limit or suspend collective bargaining if I so chose. We did not do that. We signed a collective bargaining agreement, but we had kind of wide latitude to make changes that were needed.
One of the things that I found most interesting, just reading about Lawrence from the outside, is that you could have, as you said, you could have fired all the teachers, but you chose to remove only the very lowest performers, only 8% of the teaching corps, and at the same time, you replaced 50% of the principals. So I'm curious about both of those things. Why did you choose to remove so few teachers, given the reform movement's idea that you have to have the absolute best teachers in front of all kids? And why so much higher percentage of principals than teachers?
So I think the receivership happened in January, in the middle of the year, and it actually gave me an opportunity to take from January to June to really assess what was happening in the district, to make a plan. And in my travels to all the schools on numerous occasions, what I saw was we had some great teachers, right? And what I tell people all the time is, great, good, or working hard to improve, we'll take those people. And that was 90% of my teachers. Was there a subset of people that needed to go that weren't doing right by kids? Absolutely. And I make no apologies for having them find some other place to be employed. But I felt like the strength of the district was actually the teaching corps. Where we did have some challenges, however, was in the leadership corps. It was a real failure of leadership, in my opinion, at the building level, particularly around parent engagement, where there was a kind of mindset where bring us your kids at 8 in the morning. We'll bring them back to you at 3 o'clock. Don't come in our building. Leave us alone. And it was pretty disrespectful, and that was not the kind of district that we wanted to create. We were hoping to create a place where families actually felt welcomed into their schools and not intimidated. And so we felt like leadership had to change.
You know, I'm curious, have you got any data showing that your teachers, that the teaching corps has improved now that you have stronger, or you've been able to pick new principals that presumably are better at developing and giving feedback?
You've confused me. The teaching corps has improved. Well, I mean, look, certainly you've seen the academic outcomes. The test scores in English and math and science are at the highest proficiency levels ever. Not acceptable. We still got a long way to go. But I think the key is, for us in Lawrence, is to focus on the school being the unit of change and allowing principals, the right principals, to work with the parents and the teachers to create a community that's right for them. And that's very different in one neighborhood to another. It's not a one-size-fits-all model. That doesn't actually work. We've seen urban education try to do the same curriculum with everyone's going to do lockstep this or lockstep that. It's never worked. So what we're trying to do is personalize the level of attention at the school level and let people figure out on the ground, who actually have deep investment, what's the right path for the kids.
Okay, you touched on this, but I'd like you to go into a little more detail about your decision to have outside operators come in, but keep the model of a neighborhood school so that kids from that same neighborhood are still going to the schools. In so many other cities where there have been reformed superintendents, we've seen schools close, turn into charter schools. The charter schools recruit from throughout the city, but they're no longer a neighborhood school, and everybody in the school has a parent who chose to send them there as opposed to kids who walk to the neighborhood school. And why did you choose to do it this way?
Boy, you're really going to get me in trouble today, huh? Why should a parent have to choose? Parents deserve great schools wherever you live. Why should they have to choose? Isn't it incumbent on us to make sure we have all great schools in all neighborhoods? When did we give up and say that it's got to be only the people that, deeply understand the system, how to navigate it for their kids? What about the other kids? That's lifeboat education. Is that really what we're about? Why do we have to choose? I don't know. It's complicated, obviously, but it's, and perhaps I'm still tilting at windmills. But in our district, we felt like we could get good schools in all of our neighborhoods, and that's what we're trying to do. Not all broad brush, one way to do it. Actually, we're trying to flip the district one school at a time. We had 1, we had 2, we had 5, we had 7. We're hoping to have 10 or 12 and have more than half of our schools be level 1 in the next few years and tip the district that way and just come at it in a very different way than is traditionally done.
Did you find in recruiting charter schools and talking to different charter operators about, coming in to be the outside operator of district schools, that it was that many of them said, well, we're not interested if it can't be a choice school, or we're not interested if our teachers have to join the union? Was that an issue?
Yeah, I think it was a mixed bag. I think locally I had enough connections, I have a lot of friends who run charter schools, that, we used to, when we were younger, we used to kind of like hide when we talked to each other. That's how negative it was between the charter and the public schools in the Boston world. We'd have to hide and talk and say, when we grow up, we're going to actually try to work this out together. Nobody's grown up yet, but we're working on that. And so, I think we had people that were willing to jump in and take the chance. And what I said was, look, you got to give up your charter. You got to give up your lottery. Your teachers have to be unionized. The teachers union, I understand, has been made out to be the devil. But you know what? Teachers need rights too. They work hard. And sometimes, by the way, the principal's not right. And so teachers need to have somebody to back them up too. Did it go too far? It absolutely went too far. It did. But they should still have rights. And so I wanted all of our people to still be part of the AFT Teachers Union. And I felt like doing things together is better than doing things to people.
You also did something kind of unusual in a school district, which is you cut 30% of the central office staff in order to push the authority down to the school district. How do you cut 30% of a central office staff? Most people would have a hard time doing that.
So when I was a principal in Boston, I spent a lifetime evading and ignoring the central office. People that know me know that's absolutely true. And then the great irony of my life was that I was brought to be a flunky at central office as a deputy superintendent, where I continued to evade and ignore the central office. The amount of waste in central office bureaucracies is astounding. The amount of inertia, places where time takes on no meaning, it's scary. And we wanted to flip the mindset of the central office. We work for the central office. No. In Lawrence, the central office, we hope, works for the schools. We don't tell you what to do. Our job is to support you so you can do your job and do it well. And so it sounds like, what did Bieber say? It sounds like wordplay. But it's a crucial distinction, right? It's the change from command and control to we actually work for you. And that's something we have to do. And we don't need 1,000 people at the central office. The money needs to flow to the schools. It just needs to be there where the rubber hits the road.
I think another thing that's really interesting, especially from listening to the panel discussion, is the role that was given to the community's voice in this reform process. I think, in a lot of places, as you said, the reform, the feeling is that reform is sometimes done to people instead of with people. So how did you think through, and what were some of the specific things that were done in Lawrence to build community buy-in and to build union buy-in?
I think with the community, we got some early buy-in by fixing the buildings. A lot of the buildings had been in disrepair, broken, jagged windows, bathrooms without doors, no toilet paper, just simple, basic things to fix the schools and make it a place where kids can go. We actually got a waiver from the state to use school money to fix our buildings, and I think parents appreciated that. I think parents really appreciated the fact that we were adding back, not taking away, arts and enrichment. And I understand that being in a play or being on the debate team may not show up on the state test, but I guarantee you it shows up in life. And there's a value for my children to get up in front of you today, in front of 500 people, and perform, or to give a speech. There's a value to that. And we want our kids to be fully actualized humans, right? And ready to go into the world. And unfortunately in education, we went so test score crazy that we narrowed everything. We took away a lot of the arts and enrichment. We even took away history just to focus on math and English, and that was unfortunate. And it's just not something I believe in. As I told you earlier, my kids go to city schools, and this is what I want from my kids. I'm often jealous about some of the things we have in Lawrence that my kids in Boston don't have. I want my kids to have those kind of experiences.
Since the powers of the receiver are so critical to the progress you're making in Lawrence, what happens when the state returns control of the schools to Lawrence and those special powers are no longer available? Do you think that these kinds of gains that you're seeing now can continue?
Yeah, I hope so. I think it needs to be thought out, and people are already beginning to think about that. In the renewed turnaround plan that was set last year, we talked about in 3 years, if progress continues, beginning the dialogue about exiting receivership. So what does that look like? Do you want it to roll back and go back to what it used to be? It's going to be hard to do in some respects. We completely changed the compensation scale, so it's kind of it's hard to put Humpty Dumpty back together the way we've done it. I guarantee you, if you try to take the power back from the principals, there's going to be a riot, right? So there's things that naturally, hopefully, will continue on. You do have to look at the functioning of a school committee. Should that be an appointed? Should it be a hybrid? Should it go back and just be what it used to be? We have some outside operators that have come and taken our lowest performing schools. Hopefully, we'll put a poison pill in that says, we won't exit receivership without this guarantee that unlocking potential or the Lawrence Teachers Union can't be undone without the express written consent of the commissioner or the governor. And so there are different ways to kind of phase out and back to the city. But I think it's important to give back to the city. I mean, I think the strength of the school system are I think the people that are in the district who are from Lawrence. That is the strength. And we're starting to see more and more, I call them kids, but they're young adults, come back to Lawrence and teach for us. I met a newly accepted corps member who's from Lawrence, and I spent 10 minutes last night saying, oh, you need to come back and teach in Lawrence. Boston, they pay more, but you won't be as happy. Because you want people to be invested.
Well, I think that's the end of our questions, and
Okay.
thank you so very much. And I guess now we. And now we get the great pleasure of seeing another performance by your students.
I think that's how we're going to end, but I think Bieber's going to talk for a
Yes,
little bit.
so to close our session, as our final student performance sets up rapidly, I am going to talk so you don't notice that they are setting up.
I got everything.
And I am going to buy time by thanking everyone who is a part of today's session, including the audience. I know it was a real commitment for people to get here, and all the Massachusetts educators who braved ice, snow, long car rides, delays to be here and to come to our session means a lot. I'd like to invite people afterwards who would like to come up, talk to some of our panelists. Jeff, I'm nominating you to hang around afterwards.
Absolutely.
He's excited to meet people. And
Can we thank the techies who have helped our
I
children
would so
today?
like to thank the crew here at the convention center.
I know our children would like to thank Andrea Persley if she's still here. Where is Andrea? Is she in the back?
She's not in the room, but she's
ran
grateful
away?
for your gratitude.
And let's tell a little story before we leave.
Jeff.
I'm in a little trouble with Teach for America. They felt that some of the requirements we had were a little bit excessive, and Josh did a nice job of trying to navigate that for us. But Andrea Persley took a chance and really allowed this to happen, so we thank her. Let's give her a round of applause in absentia.
And I think we are going to welcome our final student performance. And if some point during this performance the lights go out, that everything's okay. Stay where you are.
Bucket in her hand,
Bieber. One more thing. No, come on.
There's 90 more really good seconds. Don't go anywhere. Maybe 100 seconds.
You guys ready for something else? Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Happy Summit.